Good afternoon and welcome to Canadians with Disabilities and their Allies. Today, my name is Brent. I'm the host, and today I have Cassandra Pollock from Disability Equity and Politics. And if I got that right, Cassandra, and
Politics of Disability and Equity.
And she does a lovely podcast with this. So it's pleased to have you on the show. It's really awesome.
She's back for a part 2.
She's back for part 2, and it's great to have you back on. And maybe we'll see if we can finish off part 2. It might be part 3.
Might be.
Yeah.
I know. Well,
we always love to have you on, Cassandra. So thank you so much.
Well, I love hanging out with you guys. Honestly, it's amazing, and
it is. It's always great to have you join us because we learn so much from you. And today, for the people that are tuning in, Cassandra's going to be talking very passionately about how to file you know what? I'm going to let Cassandra talk all about this, and it's about a human rights complaint and the process and what goes through that whole process. It's quite lengthy, but it's very, very important to understand the process because you need to stand up for what your rights are.
And obviously, I'm not very good at it because I've failed it like 4 times now. I've tried and I've failed 4 times.
Well, it's intimidating, and I've had people tell me even that sometimes they're like, "Well, I filed or I talked to this lawyer," but sometimes it's how you're presenting it too.
Oh, okay.
Right? Like some people, if you might not know exactly what you should be filing under. Like you might say, well, I was discriminated because this, and this, but you're not wording it or focusing on the thing that's going to move your human rights complaint forward. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if we'll get to that part. And then I'm not the all-out expert on it. I'm not a lawyer. I just have been a human rights activist for most of my adult life and even earlier, thanks to my parents. And I grew up in a family that, taught me to follow processes and do these things so that I was prepared later in life if I fell into these situations. So that's the limit of my expertise. It's just life experience and not any formal training or anything.
Yeah, but it's very important to have the information out there. It's just so that people will know at least the process that you go through in order to file, and then they can, read and learn more from you, right? And, it's about communicating and connecting.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to say so one of the things that gets confusing to people is you got the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
Okay.
And then you also have your provincial or territorial Human Rights Commission, and they deal with different types of complaints. Okay. So as a general rule, it's the Canadian Human Rights Commission is dealing with things that are federally regulated, whereas the provincial is more on things that are provincially like they have different jurisdictions. That's how.
Yeah.
Under our Constitution, there's a separation of powers and what provinces deal with versus what the federal government has purview over. And so, and when your human rights, so the Human Rights Commission is also it's not based on the Charter of Rights. So the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it's based on the Human Rights Act. And a lot of times, like I myself, sometimes when I'm talking, I will confuse the two when I'm trying to explain things to other people, and that's on me. But there are things in the Human Rights Act that are also a part of the Charter of Rights, right? Like there's some things that are laid out, but the Human Rights Commissions, whether it's federal or provincial or territorial, deals with the Human Rights Act specifically, and the Human Rights Act is actually more detailed. So a lot of the charter rights, it tells you that you have charter protections for these things, and these are the protected grounds. The Human Rights Act is actually more expansive on that. It is a much more expansive part of.
Like in my case, like I said, I filed 4 different times, and whenever I get a response back from them, they say your complaint doesn't contravene the code. They say that the word code. So when they talk about the Human Rights Code, are they referring to the Provincial Act, or are they referring to the Federal Act?
It depends. I mean, in my experience, if you call the wrong commission, so if you call the provincial and it's federal, they will likely say, actually, that's not covered under us, that's covered under federal.
Oh my.
But if it's not based on the, because there's the Federal Human Rights Act, there's also each province and territory also has its own Human Rights Act. And so, and that's where I think it can get confusing for people. So if, one of the things that what I would say is, if they're saying, well, it's not under the code, you can ask them, well, do you mean that this isn't the provincial or federal? Like, which one is it? If it's covered under this, or, is it just not covered under one of the acts?
Well, I don't know about Alberta, but in BC, you basically aren't even allowed to ask any questions. Like if you ask a question, they're like, well, you can refile and try again and ask the question again. I mean, it's really
you can ask questions.
It's really prohibitive, and yeah.
You can ask. The trick is you got to ask before you file,
I guess, but they don't even allow you that.
Well, that's
wrong.
That is wrong. And I'll tell you something. So when I called up when I was dealing with this issue with the courts, where I was not having my the duty to accommodate met, which is under the Human Rights Act, I actually I heard they were like, oh, well, we're not taking in-person or phone appointments at this time, which is not the norm. They used to. And I was like, well, that's my whole issue, is I can't fill out these online forms or do this email. And so I left a message, because they said somebody would get back to me within 24 to 48 hours. But I was concerned about this. So I called the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and I said to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, look, I know this falls under provincial. I called the Provincial Human Rights Commission, and this is the message that was on their machine. And that's actually, so now I'm concerned, like, that they're not going to accommodate my disabilities, which are the same accommodations that I'm trying to file a complaint against. And they said to me, wait for them to call you back. And if they do not, if you still don't get anywhere and they're still not going to accommodate you, then you can call us.
Right.
Well, it's almost like kicking the can down the road, right? It's like you don't want to deal with it, so it's somebody else's jurisdiction.
Well, and they tried to weasel, and as soon as I said, well, the Canadian Human Rights Commission said that if you weren't willing to accommodate me, that I could call them, then they were like, oh no, that's not what we're saying. And so I think that's very important. But I'm just going to pull up. I just want to pull up my screen, so I'm going to be reading here.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like one of those little hot potato, situations. Like, oh no, that's up to you. It's up to you. federal versus
Yeah. So if you
Okay.
believe you've experienced some kind of discrimination, you may be able to file a complaint. Okay. So if you, the first step in filing a human rights is telling them what happened, what was the situation. So the who, what, when, and where, and how that you feel you were discriminated against.
Say that if you who, what, where, when.
Yeah, yeah. Who, what, when, where,
how.
Yeah. So the 5 W's and how.
Yeah. And
and then they will contact. So it says we aim to contact you within 20 days of having received a complaint. That's their aim. If your complaint is accepted, you'll be notified, and the commission will send a copy of your complaint to the organization that your complaint is against, which would be the respondent. And then it is at that point that the respondent will find out, and then it gives the number. There's a number, you can go on the Canadian Human Rights Commission website, and it under how to file a complaint, and it'll give you the number. You'll be asked, so there's a privacy notice, and you have to authorize the commission to collect your personal information. This is necessary because it helps the commission to be able to process your complaint. You may also choose to allow the commission to use your complaint information for research and education purposes. If you want, that's optional. And the privacy notices provide you the legal information on how your personal information will be protected. So of course they do have, we have privacy laws that says they have to protect your information. So under the Human Rights Act, the commission is allowed to collect complaint information such as the content of a person's complaint form in order to process people's human rights complaints. Some of your complaint information is personal, and the commission will ensure the information is protected under the Privacy Act, and it will only disclose it in these 3 circumstances: to deal with the complaint, which is sharing with the respondent for their comments; if there is a legal reason. So for example, if there is a need to disclose the information under the rules of a court or tribunal. If there's a legal obligation there, then they have to. And then Section 8 in brackets 2 of the Privacy Act allows it if it is in your best interest. So if they determine that it is in your best interest under some circumstances to do it, then they can. And so the people who will see your personal information are commission staff, contractors working on your complaint, the respondent, so the person or organization you're complaining about will see the complaint, and members of the Human Rights Tribunal or other courts as needed. So if it goes beyond the tribunal and is referred to a higher court, then it obviously they would get it. So the commission, tribunal, or court may make the details of your complaint public during a hearing if in a ruling or during a judicial review of the complaint. So those are the 2 set where they would make it public. And so you have to give permission for that. And then there's also, now this is something I wanted to outline. So under ways to file a complaint, and I want to talk about this because this actually applies to my situation that I was talking about last time when I was filing a complaint against my provincial courts. If you believe you've been discriminated, you may wish to make a complaint. Okay, so you don't need a lawyer to file a complaint. And if you need help with your complaint, it says you can reach the commission by email. And then it also says one way, there's an online complaint form that you can fill out. And then you can also download a complaint form off the Canadian Human Rights Commission site or the provincial site. whichever applies, and you can mail that in. What it does not mention, so in my case, because of my disabilities, I have barriers to filling out online forms and writing detailed, coherent emails. And I do not have anybody in my life that can help me with that. And so I was able to call them. You can call them at their toll-free number. And you can call, so you can call your prospective commission and you can say, I have a barrier due to my disabilities, that makes it, that I need help filling out the online complaint form or email or whatever. And could you help me? Could I get somebody to transcribe my complaint onto the form? Mm-hmm. And then they will do it. They may ask you, like in my case, I was asked, well, okay, so if this goes forward within the tribunal, will you, do you have a verifiable documented medical condition that you can have a doctor provide records and confirm that this is a barrier? And I said, yes. So you have to be able to verify that you actually have a disability and that some kind of medical professional can back it up and say, this is what the medical condition is that is creating this barrier, right? Especially if the complaint is around disability. Like in my case, the complaint itself was that I was trying to do things through the courts and I couldn't find anybody in the courts to transcribe and accommodate my disability. So that's under duty to accommodate. I was having duty to accommodation issues and I needed to file a complaint. And the complaint process, they were also asking me to do the same thing. But when I called them and they explained, well, my actual complaint is that I cannot do these online forms and I cannot do this, and I actually need somebody from the commission to transcribe my own. I know how the process works. I know how all this, I just need somebody to transcribe my own words onto the complaint form and then send it to me so I can verify it and confirm that it's correct and move forward. And that's what they did. And so that's very important. So if, if you have any physical or learning disabilities that provide a barrier to, doing the complaint form online or doing that, the Human Rights Commission has a duty to accommodate you and provide that transcription service.
You know what? Sorry, I was going to say,
ahead.
You know what pisses me off about the whole human rights complaint? Like in my case, the whole system doesn't seem to allow for systemic discrimination. Like in my case, like I've filed 4 different complaints and they're all centered around the systemic discrimination of PWD system, social assistance, right?
So
and so where they get you is they say, well, as long as we're not treating anybody else differently, then it's not discrimination, and it just pisses me off. It's like,
here's the thing, and it's tricky even when you're talking to a lawyer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when you're talking to a lawyer, you actually have to do your own research and say, I've researched this. This is what it says. This is what and you actually, because a lot of times, I mean, I've heard people will say, well, I went to a lawyer and they said this, and it's like, well, so the lawyer just doesn't have any imagination and doesn't know how to read between the lines of what you're saying. So you actually kind of got to do a bit like what I found, like what you're like, that kind of specific complaint, and we can talk about it afterwards. There's a specific way to do that.
Well, it's, when a person already has their disability, and then they have to now prove the reason why they need that help. I mean, that's a huge accessibility issue and also a huge barrier. you know,
But you should be able to get a I mean, most people
Yeah.
that have disabilities, like in my case, I mean, I could go to my doctor and he can give me a accommodation letter tomorrow.
right.
Right? That's all I need.
But my whole point is, and I mean, you can agree with this, Brent, and the same with
Yeah.
Cassandra, is
Yeah.
the entire social assistance system is founded on systemic discrimination. I mean,
Yeah.
it's discriminatory.
Well, I know.
It's discriminatory
agree.
on the marital thing. You know, it's like if you're married, you get punished. If
Yeah.
if you leave the province for 30 days, you're punished.
Yeah. So,
You know,
please leave.
if you get a pension like I do, you get punished with a clawback. All these
Yeah.
things are systemic, right? And they basically say, well, it's not a discrimination if
That's a class.
as long as we're treating everybody else the same. Like they basically turn it to me and say, well, prove us.
It's just not within the purview.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not within the purview of the kind of systemic discrimination is not something that you can deal with necessarily through a human rights complaint.
Yeah.
That would have to be a legal process because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately you need a court to rule in your favor. And if the first court, then you move up the line till you get to the Supreme Court. And when the Supreme Court makes the decision,
Yeah.
because if you get a provincial court to decide, then somebody can challenge it and say, I don't feel that the provincial court, and then they can take it to the next level to this. And then
Yeah.
right. So you actually have to get decisions. And once a decision has been made by the higher courts, that can then become a part of the human rights complaint process too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But-
I mean, there's so many roots to all this systemic discrimination.
Yeah.
And you need to cut those roots off and get to the bare bone of what the problem is, right? It's
Well,
like
and I was going to get into that. Like, I'm going to get into a few things
Yeah.
because before we go too much, there's more to this.
I don't mean to derail you. I just wanted to.
No, I think it's important.
Yeah.
So, now where is it? So, provincial and territorial. Where is it? Now I gotta find. Where is it? Complaints. Hold on. Human rights. I gotta find. There's also an accessible. So the Accessible Canada Act is now it is also covered under the Human Rights Commission. So you can file a complaint under the Accessible Canada Act now too. So am I in the right place? There are many organizations in Canada that are responsible for helping people when they are treated unfairly. Before you make a complaint to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, it's important to make sure that you complain to the right organization so that you can get the help you need as fast as possible, which is what we were kind of talking about. So I want to file a complaint related to accessibility. If you make a complaint to the commission for unfair treatment related to accessibility, we may refer you to another organization that is better suited. So before you file a complaint with the commission, so they kind of want you to go through several. So if it's related to transportation, you may want to file a complaint with the the Canadian Transportation Agency before. And if you do that and it doesn't go anywhere, then you can go the next step. Same with the Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission. If it's related to access to services under broadcasting or telecommunications, then you can make a report to them. And then Government of Canada. So the other place is if your discrimination is Government of Canada departments, Crown corporations and agencies, then you want to so Federal Public Sector Labor Relations and Employment Board is one. And then if it's so that's what the Canadian Human Rights Commission takes care of, is transportation, broadcasting and telecommunications, government of Canada departments, crown corporations, and agencies. But if you want to file a human rights complaint against a privately run business, such as a retail store, a restaurant, a gas station, or an insurance company, it's your provincial or territorial human rights agency that you want to go through.
Interesting.
If you want to file a complaint against your provincial or territorial government, then you also have to. So it's against your provincial or territorial government. It's the provincial or territorial human rights agency. You know, there's also like if you were fired without cause, if you've been fired from a federal department or organization, and the reason you think you were fired is linked to one of the grounds of discrimination listed in the Human Rights Act, then you can also go to the Canadian Human Rights Commission. If you've been fired from a federal department or organization, but cannot link the reason to think you were fired to a ground of discrimination, then you go to the Canadian Labor Program. If you've been fired from a provincial or territorial government department or organization, or from a privately run business, such a restaurant or store, then you go to the provincial territorial. And this is all actually laid out. So under the Canadian Human Rights Commission website, I'm actually taking all of this right off of there. It's right on there. And now, if I believe here's where it gets interesting. If I believe my charter rights have been violated, and I need help filing a complaint related to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, then you need a lawyer. If you don't know a lawyer, you can there's a use of provincial and territorial legal aid services that they give you, and they give you a link to a list of those. If you want to, obviously, if it's a criminal matter, it's RCMP. If I was mistreated by police and want to file a complaint about police conduct, the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission for the RCMP is who you would go to before you file. If you're still not getting any, if it's based on human rights though, and you're not getting anywhere, then you can obviously, any of these steps, if it's based on human rights, you go to these agencies first. If you don't get anywhere with those agencies, then you can escalate it to the next level. Except in the case where you need a lawyer. Like I said, if it's a charter rights issue, then you need to get a lawyer. So that's for so lawyers deal with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And the Human Rights Commission deals with human rights acts. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
So
does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, all kind of categorized into under the one page.
Yeah, and then a personal there's also gives you links to an alternative resolution practitioner if it's a personal. If you want to file a human rights complaint against a bank, an airline, phone company, or trunking company, that's the Canadian Human Rights Commission. And if it's against a First Nations, that's government, regardless of the province or territory, that's also. So Indigenous rights is the Federal Human Rights Commission.
Okay.
Right, not the provincial. So if you have it, if it's based on you being First Nations, you do not want to go to your provincial, you want to go to your federal. One. And I think that's an important one to know, because and a lot of that has to do with the treaty systems in Canada, because the treaties were made with the federal, they were made with the Crown, which is represented under the federal government since Confederation. And so I think
years ago.
Yeah. And it's, so there's also, I was going to get in, so provincial and territorial, you can go under your different, and your provincial and territorial ones will help you. but I think that that's interesting. Like sometimes, and what you were talking about, Neil, like you know how I like to read. I like to read things and get into detail, and we've had many conversations about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and stuff like that, and a lot of this stuff that like that you're talking about this patchwork of disability systems and how they discriminate. That would be a charter challenge.
Oh, okay.
Right, because right now you would literally need to make a charter challenge. And I have a friend that's a lawyer that I talk to sometimes, and I'm not a lawyer, and that's why I talk to him. And so, but what I've gotten in my understanding as a layperson is, so you can do a charter challenge that says that the government, and the way the Constitution, it says that the provinces can set up social services like income support programs, but it also says that the federal government can, and I can't remember exactly, but it basically says as long as it's not infringing on a provincial program. And that is kind of why we keep getting stuck in this, is because of how it's prescribed under the charter. Like not just the Charter of Rights, but because the Charter of Rights is part of a much larger document, which is the Canadian Constitution. The Canadian Constitution is not one document; it's several documents, of which the Charter of Rights is a part of. And I believe the Human Rights Act is also, but I'm not clear. I'd have to double check.
One part of a whole broad range. It's like
right. So there's this whole division of powers that goes into, and like I've noticed some things, like when you, at the time that this was made, Canada was the division of powers was made. Canada was quite a different country. And
it's kind of like I talked about my spaghetti episode, right? All the components, right?
Right. And so one of the things they said is we didn't have the ability to communicate with each other or travel the way across the country, the way we do now. Like we're much more, Toronto is not as far away today as it was 100 years ago, or even 30 years ago. We are able to get information much faster and coordinate things much quicker because of technology. And so one of the things they said, and I always talk about this and this is an example, they always say when they're talking about healthcare, well, that is under the province's jurisdiction. But if you actually read the division of powers where it talks about the provincial purview, it basically gives what it gives is it does not mention, because this division of powers was not made at a time when we even had universal health care. So it only prescribes that the provinces take care of the infrastructure, so the building and maintaining and staffing and running of hospitals, labs, and clinics and everything, and that infrastructure. They provide the service. So basically they build, maintain, and provide the services. But nothing in there says that there's nothing in there that says the federal government, and I don't think this has ever been challenged. Maybe there's a lawyer out there that can say it was just assumed. It was just basically that an assumption was made that the healthcare coverage, so our actual healthcare insurance, would also be provincially, but it's not actually explicitly prescribed. And I'm as a layperson looking through things, have not been able to personally find a decision made by the Supreme Court that says that has to be that way. So that's kind of up in the air, and that's an example of division of powers. And the same thing when you're looking at social services, we know if we're supposed to have certain rights, rights of mobility. And the right of mobility is the ability to travel when you want, to live where you want, to find work where you want without barrier. And you know, there are some limitations that have been put on that, that says that, you know, if you want to go and, you know, access healthcare in an, you know, get healthcare in another province, that you have to show some kind of reasonable amount of reasonable residency requirement is
for a period of time.
Yeah. And that's reasonable. And that's kind of, but it also kind of feeds into how it creates a barrier with when it comes to our freedom of mobility, because we've got these provincial, because, you know, because the disability income, the disability support and disability income support programs are provincial. That's why that barrier comes up, because it says, well, if it's a provincial thing, then they have a right to make sure that you have met certain residency requirements, which is why I think we've been talking all along, is that, well, that's why the federal government needs to give a fully federal, not a top up, but a fully federal universal basic income for persons with disabilities. And you know, and the reason for that is that's the only way to alleviate that residency requirement by province.
Right. So that person can then be wherever they want to be, or wherever they need, or wherever they need to go, without saying, well, you can't leave the province for more than 30 days unless you have written consent from the government, the ministry, or
so I get extended health benefits through AISH,
right?
And when I go to BC to see my family, my extended benefits are not, I don't have any coverage in BC of my extended benefits. There is some for your, like for the regular provincial health care that everybody gets. If you're visiting another province, you can access health care with your provincial health care card from your other province. But if it's not covered under that, and it's covered under an extended benefit provided by a provincial income support or disability support program, then it's not covered.
Well,
and
that's very important to actually note.
Yeah, and which is another reason why I keep saying, like, I think when it comes to disability, we need a fully federal universal basic income, and get rid of the disability income supports, and provide a fully federal basic income for persons with disabilities, and let the provinces are probably best to determine what infrastructure is needed for healthcare, but there's no reason why we shouldn't have the same healthcare coverage regardless of where we live, and the freedom to access that across, and get the same access no matter which province we're in, and just have one Canadian healthcare card instead of all these provincial ones. That does not take away the province's ability to run the infrastructure.
Because I remember a time where I traveled with my mom. This is going back to how time flies by. Took her on a long journey across the country, right? So we went back to Prince Edward Island. She had a family friend there, and I grew up with the lady in my life, and she was a lovely lady, and her son and her had to move to Prince Edward Island due to family. And so they sunk their roots down in the community. Since then, she still lives there. Her son now lives in Alberta, and out in Warburg, actually.
Oh,
and way up in Warburg. So I haven't seen him in years. But here's the thing: so we traveled out there. I said to the provincial government, "I'm going." I didn't, I said, "I'm going with my mom." So, oh, okay, have a good time. That was it. I just said, yeah, we're going. Well, when you're back, I don't know. My mom goes, we're back when we're back. I'm like, whoa. She said, we're back when we're back. And the worker.
Your mom has spoken.
Yeah. She just says, well, you need to ask permission. She goes, I already gave permission. We're going. So, hey, we'll see you. I was like, oh my God, Mom, you can't do that, right? But here's the thing, right? The worker who handles GIS and OAS, right? They handle the administration, who was the same worker as for me. So it was kind of like, okay, Provincial, and then the senior. So the same worker. I went in and my mom goes, oh, that's how it's going to go. She goes, okay, fine. But the point I was going to make is that I was reminded by the worker too that, okay, so just because you're going there, which is fine, but your medical coverage, if you get sick, your medical coverage, you're going to need to apply for a BCAA coverage. Otherwise, your medical coverage is not going to follow you there for if you need any enhancements, kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah, like you have to get travel insurance basically to go to another province to get the same Otherwise,
you're not going to be covered. Like you need medication that's normally covered under BC, you won't get it there. My mom made that mistake. She got
I have to. So if I go to BC, I have to contact my worker and my doctor to get an extended amount, so an extra month's supply, so that I don't run out while I'm there.
Yeah, and that's the best way to do it, because otherwise, it can add up, especially if you're traveling.
But if and this is regardless, even people without disabilities, we should not have to do. We should just get
there's so many loopholes. There's so many
there's nothing saying if we have universal health coverage that we have one health coverage across Canada. That does not take away the jurisdiction of provinces of deciding where and when to build hospitals and how to staff them.
Exactly. I mean, it's not rocket science. Like, I don't know why they don't have it done.
Because every time they've tried to do something, like even this whole dental care thing, there's still provinces going up in arms like that's our jurisdiction. Well, actually, if you look at the division of powers, there's nothing that says that the actual coverage of healthcare is your jurisdiction. It only says that your jurisdiction is building, maintaining, and staffing and running of healthcare facilities. There's nothing in there that says that universal, because those decisions were made before we had our universal healthcare system, healthcare insurance.
Well, you're talking about federal versus provincial here, but I also wanted to make the point, and I think this is a crucial point, because again, taking my pension as an example, the clawback of my survivor's pension. Another thing that really annoys me is this whole idea that that the province, never mind federal, let's just put federal to the side, but the province can have a double standard on what's appropriate. Like, for example, like when it comes to pensions, there are so many checks and balances in the labor codes, right? Like you look at the Ministry of Labor, they have so much stuff that protects the pension and says, let's protect the pension. It's a protected income, like all this stuff. And yet, so under that ministry, it's like
unless you have to access a provincial support program, then all of a sudden
so they protect it under the one ministry, say it's a protected income, like don't touch it, it's protected. And then the other ministry, the social services ministry, can say doesn't matter, let's rape and pillage it.
Here's the thing, and here's where I think as activists and advocates for disabilities, where we can put the argument. Both Canada Pension and employment insurance are things that you paid for with your employment income. When you were employed, you paid into these services, and the reason you paid, so Canada pension plan you paid into so that when you get to retirement age and can't work anymore, you had an income to replace your working income. That's what a pension is. It's to replace your working income. Employment insurance is there if you're employed, which a lot of people on provincial disability have some kind of employment and pay into employment insurance. If you're employed and you're paying into that, so if you lose your job, that you have something to cover the income that you lost. Mm-hmm. So here's where we need to start putting pressure on provincial governments, is we need to be telling them, since both Canada Pension and employment insurance are things we paid into with our employment income, and you allow us to work and pay into these, if we, just because we can't work full-time enough to sustain ourselves, mm-hmm. we're allowed to keep a certain amount of our working income. So the employment insurance we paid into with that working income and the Canada pension we paid into should be treated the same way as our employment income is treated.
Mm-hmm. So here's a scenario for you. I worked at a company, and of course Neil knows where I'm going with this. I worked at a company and I injured myself severely. I dislocated some discs in my back, fractured, a lot of physiotherapy, chiropractic treatment, went through it, yada yada.
WCB.
And WCB. So I got WCB involved. Then of course I had lack of hours, and it was supposed to be, and I didn't even know this. Like, I knew about EI, how it all worked. Well, I phoned EI. Like, well, are your hours less than 50%? I go, I don't know. These are my hours. Can you send us a copy? Email us. It's faster. Just email us, take a picture, and send it to us. Oh, your hours are actually below the 50% threshold. Okay, what does that mean? That means now you are now eligible for an amount that your employer needs to now legally pay you. I go, well, that's what they scheduled me. So now they had to investigate into it. Well, where's the paperwork for it? Well, I don't know. So the employer said, well, they couldn't fight it. I knew where it was. So I helped EI with that process. So now they had to get a claims officer involved. The claims officer now looked into it. Okay. So they started doing all the legwork for me. So because I had injured myself, I couldn't actually go in there and actually show EI. I couldn't actually go and show them because they had an AO investigation officer into it. So I said, well, it's in box, blah, blah, and it's over in section area. Well, redacted out. Where's the original copy? Well, now the employers managed to keep a copy because they give a copy to EI. All the stuff gets paid out. So conveniently, nowhere to be found. Liability, nothing on me. I was good. However, it came down to the ministry. Declare your EI. Declare your WCB. Oh, well, that's not earned income.
It is earned income. You pay into WCB with your employment income.
Yeah. So I had to go through, and that doctor actually had to go through. They took it off me, dollar for dollar. They took the EI off, dollar for dollar, and I said no EI. And EI actually then had to vouch for me and said, hey, it's actually under a medical EI. It was a medical EI benefits. So because it's under medical EI, they couldn't. It was fully exempt. They
shouldn't. It should be exempt anyway. Yeah. It's replacing the income. So So here you go. They say, okay, you can be on your provincial disability, and you are allowed to earn this much money.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's based on your net, not your gross. So your net is after all deductions.
That's right.
But that gross part, those deductions are not just taxes. A lot of them are paying into WCB. They're paying into employment insurance, and they're being paid into your Canada pension plan. That's where those deductions are going, and they're going there to replace your employment income.
Yeah.
So there is, if you're saying employment income is exempt, then shouldn't your Canada pension and your employment insurance and your WCB that you paid for to replace your working income in these events should also be treated the same as working income?
And there
And
was
that's what we got to fight. That's where we got to focus.
because there was a section right in there, and the doctor looked it up for me. And there was a section on there, and the ministry goes, "Well, what page are you looking at?" Right? I'm already in pain and suffering, and I'm just like, I go, I said, "Don't do this to me." And then, well, no, what page are you looking at? I go, the doctor actually has it here, and I said, phone. I said, you know what you want? I said, you want to argue? I said right to the ministry. I go, you want to argue with me? Give the doctor a phone call right now. I've got the phone number. They're waiting for you. Are you serious? I go, I am serious. I said, because I've got the document right in front of me, and as she states, and he signed it too. He said, give this to the ministry, and it's on section blah blah. And where are you reading that from, Brent? I go, look, do you have access to the computer? Well, obviously. I go, well, obviously, me too. I'm looking right at it. So they went to the other page, and then, oh, there it is. Okay, so here's the kicker. So come by at 1:30 this afternoon. We'll have a office check ready for you. I go, I'm in pain and suffering. I can't make my way down to the ministry's office. If that was the case, I would be now working, wouldn't I?
Right.
Okay. Did you want us to mail it out to you? Well, that's going to take 3 or 4 days. I need the money now. Why do you need it now? Because I need that money to pay my friggin' rent, because you guys clawed it all off me. If I don't have that money, I don't pay my rent. And if I don't pay my rent, I'll be freaking homeless.
Well,
we don't want that.
I know. And the thing is so often, even out here in Alberta, like I had a friend, and now he wasn't on AISH, he should have been on AISH, but that's a whole other story. But anyway, his worker kept making all these demands, and some of the demands she was making on him, like she said, well, you have to apply for your CPP early, because he was 60, but he wasn't 65. And so he applies for, well, now you got to apply for guaranteed income supplement. And it's like, and every time she sends out this letter, she's holding back, and he's having to deal with his landlord. And here's the thing, GIS doesn't kick in until you're 65.
Exactly.
And it's like, how can you sit there and you're withholding this man? And he ended up getting evicted because of this stuff, because his worker didn't know what the she was bloody doing. And she didn't understand, and so often, I mean, I've had really good workers that they know everything and they're right on it, and they know all the ins and outs of the corresponding legislation and policy and everything. But then you get other workers that they just know the basics and they don't have a clue, and they send out and they put people in these precarious situations.
Here's another part of the story too. So I made my way down. They said 1:30. So I took some painkillers. The ministry said, well, okay, come by after 1:30. So I said, well, I gotta go and see the doctor, get some painkillers. So I went there, and he's okay. So he gave me some stuff to take, gave me a prescription. I went and got it filled. Then I made my way down. It kicked in. I think it was like 45 minutes. And finally, okay, I could actually move slowly. And he said, you need to keep yourself limber, though, Brent. Please keep yourself limber. So it actually did. I mean, it was actually good. I made my way down. So I got down there. A couple of people in front of me. I just sat down in their waiting room. So I get there. And then, so just one line up to stand to go and get your check. Okay, well, we need people. We need you to stand in the lineup, not sit down in the waiting room, so we know who's picking up their check. I go, I actually need to sit because I got real bad, severe pain. So anyway, they made an exception. They called my name. I came up, got my check. They actually need to see you at the window, in the office. So the receptionist needs to see me. Why do you need to see me? I have a form here, and I need you to go and get signed from EI. I'm like, say what? Yeah, to basically show that you are, see if you are eligible for EI benefits. I go, I'm already on EI benefits medical. Okay, well, we need to see, because it says there you need to be looking for work. And we need EI. Yeah. Oh, I did. I freaked, and they said, we need you to have EI to verify that you are receiving medical benefits. So I go all the way down into Walnut Grove. Okay, it's not a hop, skip, jump from downtown Langley. So I go all the way down, jump on a bus to get all the way down there.
And you busted everywhere. I can't even imagine. Yeah, I know.
I took the bus all the way down there, and it was busy. It was very busy. I had to wait there an hour and a half to get my number called.
Well, because it's employment insurance. They're always busy.
So I get there, and then they said, what can I do for you? I said, well, the Ministry of Social Development sent me here. okay, for what? To basically prove that I'm on medical benefits. What's your social insurance number? So I gave it, oh, yeah. Why, they already have access to that information. I go, apparently not. I said, can you give me a printed form? Because otherwise they don't give me a hell of a time. So they gave me a printed form. They said, oh my God, Brent, I am so sorry you're going through this. I go, right now, my doctor told me to take it easy. I'm running around frickin' town here. Mm-hmm. I just got to delay my healing process. So I go, oh my God, to the ministry, what can I do for you? Well, could you not have mailed it to us? Oh my God. I just said, you guys need to get your act together. I said, oh my God. I said a couple other words, but I'm not going to say that now.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Like I know.
I just told him, to get your S together, right? I said, because I said, oh, so, I mean, it delayed my healing too.
Also on the subject of human rights, I was at a rally on the weekend it was a housing as a human right rally. Mm-hmm. And I met some amazing people, and I got in some really great conversations about what their and I said, one of those advocates, I sent the information to Neil. I did an email introduction because I really would like, I've reached out to her, and she said, yeah, it was okay to do that. And so I hope that you guys can set up a time. I know she's so busy right now. But one of the things we're fighting, and this is, Calgary has kind of been ground zero. Alberta, I believe, is the only province or territory in Canada that has absolutely no rent control of any kind. Mm. There's only one thing. They're only allowed to raise your rent once a year.
Right.
But there is absolutely no controls or caps on how much. And there are huge profits being made. Like they've done an analysis based on publicly verifiable records of these big REITs like Boardwalk REIT and Main Street REIT. Yeah. And they are like, they're huge, like what their cost is, like what their cost is versus what their so your revenue is the total amount of money you bring in.
Right.
Your overhead is the cost of running your business. So if it's an apartment building or a rental, your cost is the cost of maintaining it and the bills that go along with it, and whether it be
sewage,
and your maintenance people and stuff like that. And then everything after all your costs and your insurance and everything else that goes to running a business is taken care of. That's what your profits are. And their profits are huge.
Oh yeah.
Like
they pay their state.
They're just giant. And so Calgary has become ground zero for fighting this housing as a human rights and saying you should not be able to make exorbitant profits on something that is a basic human right. Mm-hmm. And now, because of course the housing crunch is across Canada, it's not just in Alberta.
Oh,
I mean, there's a lot of
one moment, I'll buzz you in. Number 9, right?
live podcast. You're gonna like that.
Right.
And so one of the things that
I love it.
They were talking about, like, and I was having a conversation with actually Anne about this, because one of the things they do when they look at out here in Alberta, when they look at other provinces, they point to, well, see, rent controls don't work. Look at all the rent evictions, or look at this aspect. But that's not the truth. They do work. The problem is they haven't done a proper thing. So what they're talking about is looking at the profits and regulating. If something like food or housing is a basic human right,
yeah,
and there's a HUMA committee, I think, that's been talking about this, by the way. The HUMA committee's been on this.
Yeah.
is if housing and food is a human right, then we need to regulate what kind of profits are being made.
You see, that's what's happening in BC right now too. There is
Yeah.
a lot of that profiteering that's going on. Average rent. I was watching. I'll have to send you a copy of that. I was actually watching it last night on a YouTube link there. I gave it to Tom, the basic income guy in Victoria. He sent me a link, and so I sent him one back. But I was watching some of this stuff, and it was a documentary. And it was a CBC Marketplace put one together too. And there was some other ones, and they're talking about the housing and the conditions across from BC. They compared Vancouver and Toronto, and they did this one, and it was disgusting of what this one gentleman had gone through. His landlord knew what the problem was and said, it's that's just what did he say? Oh, that's just it's rusted. You could tell that it was mold.
Yep.
Oh, are you going to fix it? Oh, it's not leaking. It's not leaking. Really?
You know what's crazy? I've lived in Alberta. Like, I'm from BC, and black mold's always a big. I mean, you're in a rainforest. Black mold's a huge thing in BC just because it's damp.
Yeah.
But in Alberta, as long as I lived here, I'd never had an issue any place. And now all of a sudden there's a lot of this black mold popping up, and that's from just lack of maintenance, right? Like, that's not even you can't even blame the environment. It's so dry here. The only reason is lack of maintenance. And I have been blessed the last 7-8 years of having a really amazing, wonderful landlord, and who hasn't, but now he's got a family, and he was a bachelor when I moved in here, and now he's married, got a baby on the way. They want the whole house. And now I have to look, and I've been looking, and I looked at this place for $1,250, which is $250 more. Plus they want you to pay, this guy wants you to pay another 40% for utilities. And there's a whole family upstairs.
Oh,
I think 40 is a little much, but whatever. And I go and look, and it was one of the reasons I've loved living in Alberta, especially Calgary, is regardless of where I lived, the place was always, they were always so much nicer than anything I'd ever lived in Vancouver. Well, when I looked at this place, this is how bad it's gotten out here. When I looked at this place, I was just like, and he's telling me that he was going through the process to get the suite made legal. And I'm looking at this place and going, in what world could this be? Do you think you're going to pass to make this legal? It was, I mean, he had the big egress windows and stuff, but the place, like, the paint job was it just was, and even the carpet, when I was looking at the carpet was so old. Like, it just, like, I could feel the dirt. Like, I could almost feel the dirt coming off the carpet and coating me. Like, it was so disgusting.
I want to come out and get you that dirt. You just watch.
Yeah, I know. And I'm like, and like, prior to moving here and prior to my accident, my house used to look like white glove clean. Now it's not. Now I went to try to, I had to take some stuff out of storage because of a dispute with the storage company. And now I look like, I'm not a hoarder. I look like one because all the stuff I had in storage from when I had a much bigger place is now I've been trying to get rid of. But so my place looks messy, but it's not what it looks messy, but it's not dirty.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? There's some dust, but it's not filth. Yeah. And this was utter, like, it was filthy. And I'm like, and I couldn't believe what he was charging. And so we're starting to see a lot of this, a lot more people. I'm looking at shared accommodations that are as much as what I'm paying right now.
Wow. Yeah. And that seems to be happening so much, Cassandra, everywhere, where some of these scrupulous landlords, like some of the big corporations, like you mentioned, they just want the profit level, and even some basement suites, like because the property taxes are so high.
Yeah. Well, if your property value goes up, and I was saying this, I was talking to a fellow by the name of Chaz Smith. He started this Be the Change Calgary that does wonderful services for the homeless people in Calgary. He sets up this. Anyway, I go to Be the Change Calgary to learn about it, but Vancouver needs something like this. You know, that's one of the things that we were talking about, was the fact that, and I lost. What did you just say?
I was talking about property taxes.
Property taxes. That's what I said to him. I said, you know, I was saying to him, it's like, well, yeah, everybody wants, because we were talking about the cost going on to a lot of people. More people are turning, you know, putting in secondary suites, and part of it is when they're like, everybody wants their property value to come up, but the other side of your property value going up is your taxes on that property also go up. And that can be a good thing in that it pays for more services municipally, but it can also mean that it, like, if your property taxes are going up because of your property value, that in times like these, that could be enough to make maybe the home you own more unaffordable for you and stuff like that. And if you've got, and then you have to pass that on to any renter you might have.
Exactly.
And it's this snowball effect that you know, like, I have empathy for homeowners. I have empathy for private landlords that, I mean, there's a lot of them there are some that are trying to take advantage of the current situation, but there's a lot that aren't.
Yeah, there's other good ones that they're
just being put between a rock and the hard place, between mortgage rates going up and property values going up, which means their property taxes go up. You know, I had a friend that they had their mortgage all up to date, but they got behind on their property tax. It was literally, they had a $600,000. It's probably worth more now. It was of a $650,000 home. Their property tax arrears were just over $3,000, just under $4,000. And if they didn't pay, they had to sell the house, because if they didn't sell the house to cover the property taxes, they could take their whole $650,000 investment away from them, over $4,000.
And you know, another thing too on that, because the property taxes go so high, so now the owner now needs to recoup a lot of that. So now,
and they pass it on to the renter, right?
And so what happens? The rents now become so high. So now PWD now want to go and rent there. So now they'll say, okay, this is how much I get. Oh, well, we can't rent to you because you know you're paying too much out of your check and into rent.
Well, so that's the other thing.
So you give an increase.
I've had to tell people, like, I'm like, look, I've been paying this much rent and I've never missed a rent payment.
Yep.
Like, because they're like, oh, well, this much. And I said, I'm a good budgeter. Don't worry. I'm very industrious. I get by. You know, like, don't be telling me what, you know, like, it's my polite way of telling them, don't tell me what I can afford. Yeah. All you need to know is I haven't missed a rent payment in 7 or 8 years, so that I've been living in the same place. That's all you need to know. You know, like, as far as my income and my ability to pay. I mean, honestly, you know, most people will put their housing as a priority over their food.
You know, and that's another, like,
or their medicine. Yeah.
Another segment that I'm going to have you back on again, Cassandra, because I'd like to continue on and talking about rent geared to income.
Rent geared to income, but also I think, yeah, because there's a multi-level approach. We need higher incomes.
Yeah. So
but we also need rent caps. And proper rent controls and profit controls, and over especially REITs and stuff like that, as well as we need as well as you know, like, it has to be a multi-level approach. Like, you have to bring the costs down, but you also have to bring incomes up. Like, they often I think we can get into a whole conversation about how governments will do one thing but not the other, and they need to do both.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that'll be a segment, Neil, that we'll get Cassandra scheduled in.
Yeah,
And that'll be
sounds good.
part 3.
Yeah.
Part 3. Yeah,
Part
and
3,
reach out to my housing as a human rights advocate friend.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Really excited
Because-
about that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Oh, honestly, like, she will blow your mind. She is amazing.
Look forward to that.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cassandra. It's been
No,
a-
absolutely.
And,
I love talking human rights. You know I do.
Oh yes, absolutely. Oh yes,
Yeah.
that's
No,
a great
I was gonna be, before we go to, I was gonna make the quick comment and say that you know, even my property tax is going up double compared to just 1 year ago. It's over double now. My property taxes were skyrocketed up 100%.
Yeah.
Doubled. It's like just over last year. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I know, and that's out of. I mean, yeah, that's out of your pocket every month too.
Yeah.
Like that goes into housing costs, and I mean, I know it has to pay for. It pays for essential municipal governments. You know, they get a certain amount of funding by the province. They don't have the ability to borrow or run deficits like provincial or federal governments. And so they rely on this, but at the same time, if your property taxes are going up so much that you're pricing people out of their own homes,
Yeah.
then that's another human rights issue.
I mean,
I think.
I ended up buying this place when I actually had money, and my first wife had money, and we got it cheap. Like we bought in it. It was $130,000 condo.
Oh.
You know, when we bought it, and now it's assessed at like, what was it, like almost $600,000 or something stupid, and it's just like, what? You know,
You can sell that and buy a house out here for half that.
Yeah, well, I'm scared, like, because people always say, well, why don't you just sell? But the thing is, once you sell, then you have to buy, which you're buying an inflated market too. So
Well,
I
that's
can't
what I'm saying. If you buy in a different province, you can reduce the costs.
Yeah.
But then of course then it goes to like, you go to another province, and now you got to go and now
reapply, proof my disability all over again.
Still disabled in another province.
You will get more though. I'll tell you.
That's true. That's true.
I get $150 for my special diet allowance, and so, but it's $17.85. But with my special diet allowance, I'm getting $19.39, and it's gonna, if the NDP gets in, it's gonna go up. I'll be getting over $2,000 from the provincial government if the NDP gets in.
Because I know that in BC, before we end the segment, I think they have their general supplement of $35, and I heard that it possibly may be going up to $100. I don't know.
Well, we've got it depending on the diet. We've got, like, I got multiple supplements for different special dietary needs. So I get I get almost $100 just for my celiac diet. And then the doctor prescribed me other things in my diet that each have a dollar amount attached to them.
Yeah, because they're going to be giving a $125 increase in July 19th. You got to wait till then till they get.
Well, and I phoned Sheila Malcolm's office.
You got 5 months. You got to wait till you get.
And I left a nasty mess. I mean, I didn't swear or anything. I didn't call her any names, but I left it kind of a nasty message about, I can't believe that you're an NDP and this is an NDP government, because you're not even with your raise, you're not giving people their entire check is not enough for them to even rent an apartment. And you divide it up into a sheltered portion, and the sheltered portion is discriminatory on its own.
Well, yeah, $1,350,
And
then you get $125, so it's still under a $1,500 threshold. You can't get anywhere for that price. Like, even in this building right now, our nasty neighbor moved away from upstairs. He was gone. It was nice and quiet for a whole month. Nobody was living up there. The new gentleman, he moved in. He's actually very quiet. He's very peculiar individual because he says, am I being too noisy? Am I being too noisy? I go, I hear a few pitter patters on there, but you know what? This is the floorboards. They creak a little bit.
It's the price
You know,
of like me.
yeah.
I'm living in a basement. It's the price of living in a basement suite or a certain type of apartment building.
But he asked me though, Cassandra. He asked me. He says, "How much was the guy before? And when he was up there, how much was he paying?" I go, "You don't want to know." He goes, "Actually, I'm just kind of curious." Well, actually, it was originally rented. He rented it from his parents, and I said his parents were pissed that they lost the unit. I thought he was the guy that was living up there was the original tenant, like for years.
Oh.
I found out that it was Mama and Daddy were out there and they were putting on these hats, and she was putting on this hat. Looks like it was like 1930s or 40s type of hat, and she was just getting her portable vacuum out. She was pissed off. She threw it in the car, and he goes, "Let's get the hell out of here." And they both put their fingers up to the building when they got in the car. And the manager was right there, and they went like to the manager. In other words, they lost their investment. Well, I mean, they were renters, but I think they were charging more to their son to rent. And I found out they were paying under $800 for this unit. They were charging their son. And I remember I talked to another lady who knew the guy that was living there, and he was paying. Apparently, he was getting $975. He was paying his parents for rent. So, but they were only initially paying just over around 810, I think it was. So they were making a little bit of a profit, not a lot, but they're giving their son a break. So now he moved out. So guess what? How much that unit's going for right now? What the new guy's renting? Just take a wild guess.
Like
1600
or something.
1750.
1750. Wow.
So now the management was so excited. They were like little kids jumping up and down with joy as soon as the guy was moving out. And I go, "Why are you so excited?" "Well, because he moved." I go, "No. I see dollar signs in your eyes." I said.
Anyway, I know you have to get out of here, Brent. We have to wrap up the show, right? You have to get out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Brent.
Yeah.
And Neil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye, Cassandra.
Until next time, Cassandra.
See you later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.